Emma Rodriguez had never wanted to be a soldier. While her classmates at the Intergalactic Defense Academy dreamed of commanding starships and leading assault teams against hostile alien forces, she preferred the quiet corners of the library, studying xenobiology and diplomatic protocols. Fighting was Jackson's thing. Her roommate lived and breathed combat tactics, spending every free moment in the training simulators. "You can't avoid combat fundamentals forever," Jackson warned her as they walked toward the training complex. His sandy hair was already damp with sweat from his morning workout. "It's a required course for all cadets." Emma adjusted her regulation training uniform, which felt foreign against her skin. "I know. I'm just here to pass, not to impress anyone." The training hall buzzed with nervous energy as first-year cadets from dozens of species gathered for their inaugural combat class. Emma recognized Xantorians with their crystalline skin that refracted light like living prisms, hulking Gorveks whose rocky hides could deflect plasma bolts, and the graceful Silith whose forearms gave them obvious advantages in close combat. Instructor Vexhai, a towering Krillian with chitinous armor and compound eyes, surveyed the assembled cadets with obvious disdain. His species had dominated the Outer Rim conflicts for centuries before humanity joined the Galactic Alliance, and his reputation for brutality in training was legendary. "Pathetic," he clicked, his translator rendering his words in cold, mechanical tones. "Another crop of soft-skinned mammals and their delusions of adequacy." His gaze swept over the human contingent dismissively. "Humans, the newest members of our alliance. Tell me, do you truly believe your kind belongs among warriors?" Jackson's jaw tightened, but Emma placed a restraining hand on his arm. She'd studied the Krillian culture extensively. They respected strength above all else, and responding to provocation was exactly what Vexhai wanted. "We shall see," the instructor continued, mandibles clicking with amusement. "Combat scenarios will be randomized. You'll face opponents from different species, different weight classes, different capabilities. Adapt or be eliminated from the program." Emma's name appeared on the assignment board paired against Thekmor, a Gorvek nearly twice her size whose stone-like skin had already deflected practice rounds during weapons training. She felt her stomach sink as other cadets whispered among themselves, some placing bets on how quickly she'd be overwhelmed. "This isn't fair," Jackson muttered. "Thekmor outweighs you by 200 pounds. "Life isn't fair," Emma replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she approached the combat circle. Thekmor lumbered into position, his rocky fists the size of Emma's head. Around them, other matches had begun, the sounds of combat filling the air with grunts, impacts, and the hum of energy weapons set to training mode. "Begin!" Vexhai commanded. Thekmor charged immediately, his massive frame surprising Emma with its speed. She barely rolled aside as his fist cratered the floor where she'd been standing. The Gorvek's fighting style was straightforward. Overwhelming force applied with brutal efficiency. Emma backpedaled, her mind racing. Everything she'd learned about Gorvek physiology flickered through her thoughts. Dense bone structure, thick skin, minimal nerve sensitivity in extremities, but Thekmor swung again, a haymaker that would have ended the match instantly. Emma ducked low and drove her elbow upward into his solar plexus, one of the few vulnerable points on a Gorvek's anatomy. The alien stumbled, surprised by the precision of her strike. "Interesting," she heard Vexhai mutter. For the next several minutes, Emma played a dangerous game of cat and mouse. She couldn't match Thekmor's strength, but she was faster, and more importantly, she understood his species' limitations. When he overextended on a lunging attack, she swept his legs, sending him crashing to the ground. Before he could recover, she locked her arm around his thick neck, applying pressure to the carotid artery, another anatomical weakness she'd memorized. Thekmor tapped out, and Emma released him immediately, offering her hand to help him up. The Gorvek accepted it with good grace, nodding respectfully. "Well fought, small one," he rumbled in his deep voice. But as Emma stepped out of the combat circle, Instructor Vexhai blocked her path. His compound eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement or malice. "Adequate technique," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent training hall. "For a female, perhaps you should consider support roles more suited to your limitations, ma'am." The word hung in the air like a poison cloud. Around the hall, conversation stopped. Even the other alien cadets seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Jackson took a half step forward, his face darkening, but Emma's expression had already changed completely. "Ma'am?" she repeated softly. She'd spent months studying Krillian social structures for her xenocultural courses. She knew exactly what HFY was doing. In Krillian society, that particular honorific was reserved for females deemed unsuitable for warrior caste. A deliberate insult that questioned not just her abilities, but her worth as a potential soldier. "Did you just call me ma'am?" Emma's voice carried a new edge that made several nearby cadets step back involuntarily. HFY's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Indeed, it seemed appropriate given your evident fragility. Emma smiled then, and Jackson later swore it was the most terrifying expression he'd ever seen on another human being. "Instructor," she said, her voice perfectly calm and controlled, "I formally request a demonstration match." The Krillian's eyes glittered. "Against whom?" "You." The training hall erupted in shocked whispers. Challenging an instructor was technically allowed under academy regulations, but it was career suicide. HFY had trained elite Krillian shock troops for decades. His combat record included victories against opponents twice his size. "Emma, don't," Jackson warned, but she was already walking back toward the combat circle. HFY followed, his movements predatory and confident. "Very well, ma'am. Let us see what humanity truly offers the Alliance." They faced each other in the center of the ring. Emma had abandoned her earlier defensive strategy entirely. When HFY attacked with lightning-fast strikes from his forearms, she didn't retreat. Instead, she met his aggression with her own, her movements becoming fluid and precise. She'd studied more than just anatomy in her xenobiology courses. She'd learned about Krillian psychology, their cultural blind spots, their assumptions about other species. They expected smaller opponents to be defensive, to rely on speed and evasion. Emma did neither. She pressed forward relentlessly, absorbing hits that would have dropped most humans, but each exchange brought her closer to her goal. Krillians were used to opponents who feared their natural advantages, their speed, their multiple limbs, their chitinous armor. But Emma had realized something that HFY hadn't considered. For all their natural weapons and armor, Krillians had one critical weakness. They'd never developed effective grappling techniques. Their fighting style relied entirely on striking with their limbs. When Emma finally managed to get inside his reach and lock her arms around his torso, HFY found himself in completely unfamiliar territory. His strikes became ineffective at such close range, and Emma's grip was unbreakable. She took him to the ground with a hip toss that would have made her old judo instructor proud, then transitioned into a submission hold that leveraged every pound of her weight against his joint structure. HFY struggled for nearly a minute before finally tapping out. The training hall was absolutely silent as Emma released him and stood. Every cadet, human and alien alike, stared at her in shock. HFY rose slowly, his pride clearly wounded but his warrior's honor intact. He studied Emma for a long moment, then gave her the traditional Krillian salute of respect. All four arms crossed over his chest. "I withdraw my earlier assessment," he said formally. "You fight with the spirit of your species." "It is formidable." Emma nodded curtly. "Thank you, instructor." And for the record, she looked around the hall, making eye contact with every cadet present. "It's Cadet Rodriguez." "Not ma'am." As the class resumed, Jackson caught up with her near the equipment lockers. "Where the hell did that come from?" he asked, still processing what he'd witnessed. Emma was already back to her usual quiet demeanor, but there was something different in her eyes now, a confidence that hadn't been there before. "You spend enough time studying how other species think, how they fight, what they expect," she said, pulling off her training gloves. "Eventually you realize that being underestimated isn't a weakness." She looked back toward the combat circles where other matches were still in progress. "It's a weapon." Jackson shook his head in amazement. "Remind me never to call you ma'am." Emma smiled. "Smart man." From that day forward, combat fundamentals became Emma's favorite class, and Instructor HFY never made the mistake of underestimating a human again.